Your Excellency, President Bola Tinubu of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I stand before you today not as a mere neighbor in this vast continent we call home, but as a brother in the struggle for Africa's true sovereignty, a struggle that has defined our peoples for generations. As the leader of Burkina Faso, a nation that has risen from the ashes of colonial exploitation and neo-colonial manipulation, I feel compelled to speak truth to power, even when that power resides in the halls of Abuja. Your rule, Mr. President, has been a profound disappointment, not just to the Nigerian people, but to all Africans who yearn for a united front against the chains that still bind us. Nigeria, with its immense population, its wealth of resources, and its historical role as a beacon of Pan-Africanism, should be at the forefront of liberating our continent from the grip of external forces. Yet, under your stewardship, it has become a shadow of its potential, a puppet dancing to the tunes played by Western orchestras in Washington, Paris, and London. Let us delve into this matter with the clarity it demands, for the stakes are nothing less than the future of Africa. You ascended to office amid promises of renewal, economic revival, and a stronger Nigeria on the global stage. But what have we witnessed? A presidency marked by inaction, complicity, and a willful blindness to the predatory interests that continue to siphon our continent's lifeblood. As the president of Africa's most populous nation, you bear a sacred responsibility, not just to your citizens, but to the entire African Union, to champion the cause of true independence. Nigeria should be leading the charge in dismantling the remnants of colonialism, rejecting unfair trade deals that favor multinational corporations over local farmers, pushing back against IMF and World Bank loans that come laced with austerity measures designed to keep us in perpetual debt, and forging alliances with fellow African states to build self-reliant economies. Instead, you have allowed yourself to be used as a tool in the Western arsenal, endorsing policies that prioritize foreign investment over African empowerment. Consider the energy sector, Mr. President, where Nigeria's oil riches should fuel continental progress, but instead line the pockets of Shell, Exxon, and Chevron. Your administration has deepened ties with these entities, granting concessions that exploit our resources while leaving communities in the Niger Delta choking on pollution and poverty. This is not leadership. This is capitulation. By aligning with Western powers in forums like the G7 or through bilateral agreements that undermine African unity, you perpetuate a system where Africa remains a supplier of raw materials, forever dependent and divided. Where is the bold stance against the CFA franc stranglehold on Francophone Africa, or the push for a unified African currency that could break the dollar's dominance? Nigeria, under a visionary leader, could rally the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, to resist such neo-colonial traps, but you have chosen silence, or worse, collaboration. And let us not ignore the human cost of your inertia. In office for over 2 years now, what meaningful strides have you made for the Nigerian people? Inflation soars, unemployment festers among the youth, who make up over 60% of your population, and basic infrastructure crumbles while billions vanish into corruption scandals that your government seems powerless or unwilling to address. The removal of fuel subsidies, hailed as a reform, has only burdened the poor, driving millions deeper into despair without a safety net in sight. Healthcare remains a privilege for the elite, education systems fail to equip the next generation, and security threats from Boko Haram to banditry rage unchecked, displacing families and shattering lives. These are not abstract failures. They are betrayals of the mandate entrusted to you by over 200 million souls. Your people suffer, Mr. President, while you court favor with the very nations that profit from our instability. Moreover, Nigeria's relevance on the world stage, its cultural exports, its entrepreneurial spirit, its diaspora achievements, owes nothing to your government and everything to the indomitable will of individual Nigerians. Think of the Nollywood filmmakers who have put African stories on global screens without state support, the tech innovators in Lagos building startups that rival Silicon Valley despite bureaucratic hurdles, or the athletes and musicians like Burna Boy and Victor Osimhen, who carry the green-white-green flag high through personal grit. These are the true ambassadors of Nigeria, thriving in spite of a government that offers little more than obstacles. Your administration has not fostered this talent. It has neglected it, allowing brain drain to rob the nation of its brightest minds, while failing to invest in policies that could harness their potential for national growth. Instead of building on the legacy of giants like Nnamdi Azikiwe or Obafemi Awolowo, who dreamed of an Africa-led renaissance, you have reduced Nigeria to a bystander in its own destiny, a nation whose influence abroad stems from private ingenuity rather than public vision. This puppetry extends to broader African affairs, where Nigeria should be a bulwark against interference but instead enables it. Your support for Western-backed interventions in the Sahel, your reluctance to condemn the exploitation of minerals in the Democratic Republic of Congo by European firms, and your alignment with agendas that divide rather than unite our continent. All of this undermines the Pan-African ideals enshrined in the African Union Charter. How can Africa achieve freedom when its giant slumbers, or worse, aids the oppressors? Your rule has emboldened those who see Africa as a chessboard for their geopolitical games. From NATO's encroachments to the subtle manipulations of aid packages that come with strings attached. By allowing yourself to be used thus, you not only weaken Nigeria but betray the collective aspiration for an Africa that controls its own narrative, its own resources, and its own future. But let us go deeper still into the ramifications of this leadership vacuum. The youth of Nigeria, inspired by movements like EndSARS, cry out for change, yet your response has been repression rather than reform, stifling dissent, censoring media, and perpetuating a system where patronage trumps progress. This is the hallmark of a puppet regime, one that prioritizes maintaining the status quo for external benefactors over uplifting its people. Imagine what could be if Nigeria led the way in renewable energy initiatives, leveraging its solar potential to power the continent instead of relying on fossil fuel deals that enrich foreigners. Or if it spearheaded agricultural revolutions, turning the vast savannas into food security hubs for West Africa rather than importing basics from abroad. These are the opportunities squandered under your watch, opportunities that could position Nigeria as the engine of African liberation. Instead, you have chosen the path of least resistance, allowing Western powers to dictate terms through partnerships that are anything but equal. Furthermore, consider the diplomatic front, where Nigeria's voice in international bodies like the United Nations or the WTO should thunder for fair trade and debt relief. Yet, your administration whispers echoes of Western rhetoric, supporting sanctions and policies that isolate fellow African nations striving for autonomy, like my own Burkina Faso or Mali. This is not solidarity. It is sabotage. By being a conduit for Western influence, you perpetuate divisions that colonial powers drew with rulers and maps, pitting Anglophone against Francophone, North against South, all to keep us fragmented and exploitable. The result? A continent where poverty rates hover at 40%, where over 600 million lack electricity, and where foreign militaries maintain bases under the guise of security cooperation. Your complicity in this system, Mr. President, is not just a Nigerian issue. It is an African tragedy. And what of the cultural imperialism that seeps in unchecked? Under your rule, Nigerian education curricula still glorify colonial histories, media outlets amplify Western narratives, and economic policies favor imports that undermine local industries, from textiles to technology. This erodes the very soul of Nigeria, turning a nation of proud warriors and innovators into consumers of foreign ideals. The individuals who shine despite this, writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, entrepreneurs like Aliko Dangote, do so through sheer resilience, not because of governmental support. In fact, your policies often hinder them. High taxes, unreliable power, and corruption that forces businesses to navigate a maze of bribes. Nigeria's global relevance is a testament to its people's tenacity, not your leadership's efficacy. If the government were the driver, imagine the heights we could reach. A Nigeria exporting not just crude oil but refined products, not just talent but retaining it to build African Silicon Valleys. Let us examine the economic indicators that lay bare this failure. GDP growth stagnates below potential, foreign debt balloons to over $100 billion, and inequality widens, with the top 1% hoarding wealth while the bottom 50% scrapes by. These are not inevitable. They are choices to align with World Bank prescriptions that austerity will save us, when history shows they only deepen dependency. As president, you could have championed the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, with vigor, pushing for intra-African trade to reach 50% of our commerce, reducing reliance on the West. Instead, implementation lags, borders remain porous to smuggling but closed to legitimate business, and Nigeria forfeits its role as the hub of African economic integration. This puppetry allows Western nations to flood our markets with subsidized goods, killing local manufacturers and jobs. How many textile factories in Kano have shuttered under your watch? How many farmers in the north have been driven to despair by imported rice undercutting their harvests? Moreover, on the security front, your administration's dependence on Western intelligence and arms deals has not quelled insurgencies but prolonged them, turning Nigeria into a testing ground for foreign military strategies. True security comes from African solutions, regional forces, community empowerment, and addressing root causes like poverty and marginalization. Yet, you opt for drones from the US and advisors from the UK, who often pursue their own agendas, from resource control to countering Chinese influence. This is the essence of being a puppet, sacrificing sovereignty for illusory support that never materializes into lasting peace. Diving even further, let us confront the environmental devastation wrought by this complicity. The oil spills in the Delta, the deforestation for export timber, the climate vulnerability that hits Nigeria hardest, all exacerbated by policies that prioritize Western energy demands over sustainable development. As Africa faces the brunt of a crisis it did little to cause, Nigeria should be leading calls for reparations and green transitions. Instead, your government signs gas deals with Europe, locking us into fossil fuels while the West pivots to renewables. This short-sightedness dooms future generations to floods, droughts, and displacement, all while individuals like climate activists in Nigeria fight alone for global attention. Your rule, Mr. President, exemplifies how neocolonialism thrives not through overt conquest but through willing proxies, leaders who trade autonomy for personal gain or political survival. By allowing the Western world to use you, you undermine the sacrifices of liberation heroes like Kwame Nkrumah, who warned of neocolonialism as the last stage of imperialism. Nigeria, with its history of resisting British rule, should embody that warning's antidote. Yet, here we are, with a president who attends summits in Davos but ignores the cries from Maiduguri or Lagos slums. This critique is not born of enmity but of urgency, for Africa's freedom hangs in the balance. If Nigeria continues on this path, the continent's dreams of unity and self-determination will remain just that, dreams. But there is still time to awaken, to reject the strings that bind you, and to reclaim your place as a leader of free Africa. The people of Nigeria deserve better. Africa deserves better. So I ask you, Mr. President, to reflect on the path you have chosen, a path that sells Nigeria's dignity for fleeting alliances and illusory gains. It is only when you have fully bartered away your country's sovereignty, when the last vestiges of independence are auctioned off to the highest bidder, that you will truly comprehend the depth of betrayal you have inflicted upon your people. History will judge you not as a statesman, but as a figurehead who occupied the presidential villa merely to bear the title, not to serve the masses who elected you. You sit there answering to the name president, presiding over ceremonies and photo opportunities, while the real work of uplifting Nigerians, tackling poverty, fostering innovation, ensuring justice, remains undone. This is not governance. It is a performance, a hollow ritual that masks the erosion of national pride and purpose. Delving into the heart of this abdication, we must confront the mounting debt crisis that your administration has engineered, a noose tightening around Nigeria's neck with every loan agreement signed in secrecy or under duress. Before your tenure even began, Nigeria grappled with external debts exceeding $90 billion, a legacy of previous mismanagement, but under your watch, this burden has ballooned alarmingly, projected to surpass $120 billion by year's end if current trends persist. You have borrowed recklessly from the World Bank, the IMF, and Western creditors, ostensibly for infrastructure and development, but in reality, these funds often vanish into opaque projects, corruption-riddled contracts, and debt servicing that consumes over 90% of federal revenues. What meaningful progress can a nation achieve when its budget is handcuffed to repayments, leaving crumbs for education, healthcare, and agriculture? Your policies, like the infamous fuel subsidy removal without compensatory measures, have only amplified this debt spiral, forcing more borrowing to plug fiscal holes while inflation ravages household incomes. But let us probe deeper into the mechanics of this indebtedness, for it is not mere fiscal irresponsibility. It is a deliberate surrender of control. Each loan from the World Bank comes with conditionalities. Austerity measures that slash social spending, privatize public assets, and open markets to foreign dominance. You have embraced these dictates, implementing reforms that deregulate key sectors like telecommunications and energy, allowing multinationals to dictate terms while Nigerian workers bear the brunt of layoffs and wage stagnation. By the time your tenure concludes, Mr. President, you will have entrenched Nigeria in a debt trap so profound that generations unborn will labor under its weight. Debts that cannot be repaid without selling off national treasures, from oil fields to seaports. This is the insidious genius of neo-colonial finance. It masquerades as aid but functions as a leash, pulling Nigeria back whenever it dares to assert independence. Consider the specifics. Your administration's $3 billion loan from the World Bank for poverty alleviation programs, which in truth funnels money into consultant fees and imported goods, bypassing local economies. Or the Eurobond issuances that attract Western investors with high yields, only to leave Nigeria vulnerable to currency fluctuations and capital flight. These debts accumulate interest at rates far exceeding Africa's growth prospects, creating a vicious cycle where new loans service old ones, eroding fiscal sovereignty. The result? Indirect rule by creditors who, through debt restructuring talks, impose policies from afar, demanding tariff reductions that flood Nigerian markets with cheap imports, killing industries like manufacturing in ABA or leatherwork in Kano. The Western world and the World Bank do not need to occupy Aso Rock physically. They govern through spreadsheets and memoranda, deciding your budget priorities, your exchange rates, and even your environmental regulations. This debt-fueled puppetry extends to resource exploitation, where loans tied to green initiatives ironically accelerate environmental degradation. Take the Great Green Wall Project or climate adaptation funds. Borrowed money that requires Nigeria to commit to carbon credits and land concessions, effectively handing over arable lands to foreign agribusinesses under the guise of sustainability. Meanwhile, your people in the north face desertification without relief, and southern communities endure oil spills unchecked. By amassing unpayable debts, you invite these institutions to advise on governance, installing their experts in ministries, rewriting laws to favor investor rights over human rights. Before long, Nigeria becomes a ward of the international financial system, its policies vetted in Washington boardrooms rather than Abuja assemblies. Furthermore, this indebtedness undermines Nigeria's diplomatic leverage, forcing alignments that compromise African unity. To secure debt relief or new credit lines, you acquiesce to Western demands, supporting resolutions in the UN that isolate anti-imperialist regimes, or joining coalitions against rivals like China and Russia, all while your own infrastructure crumbles. The debt overhang stifles innovation. Why invest in domestic R&D when funds are diverted to repayments? Nigerian startups, vibrant as they are, receive no state backing, relying on venture capital from Silicon Valley that often extracts equity and data in return. Thus, even technological advancement becomes another avenue for indirect control, with algorithms and platforms owned abroad dictating Nigeria's digital future. And let us not overlook the social ramifications, where debt-driven austerity breeds unrest. Your budgets prioritize debt servicing over social welfare, leading to cuts in subsidies for fertilizers, medicines, and education, pushing millions into poverty while elite allies prosper from import licenses and contracts. The youth, already disillusioned, migrate en masse, their remittances propping up the economy more than your policies ever could. This is how the Western world runs Nigeria indirectly, by creating dependency so acute that any deviation risks default, sanctions, or currency devaluation. They decide what crops farmers plant through tide aid, what curricula schools teach via educational loans, and even what news media report through democracy promotion funds that favor pro-Western outlets. By the close of your term, Mr. President, the debts you accumulate will not just be financial. They will be moral and existential, binding Nigeria to a future where sovereignty is a relic. The World Bank will assist with privatization drives, selling off NNPC assets or national grids to their preferred bidders. Western powers will partner on security, basing troops under debt forgiveness deals that turn Nigeria into a forward operating base. And all the while, your people will pay the price in higher taxes, reduced services, and lost opportunities, realizing too late that their leader was not a guardian but a gatekeeper for external interests. This is the ultimate letting down of your people, trading their dignity for digits in a ledger, their future for favor in foreign capitals. How will you answer to history when this betrayal manifests in the economic chaos you have unleashed upon your nation, most glaringly in the utter devastation of the Naira since you resumed office? When you assumed the presidency in May 2023, the Naira traded at approximately 460 to the US dollar, a rate already strained but manageable with bold reforms. Yet, under your watch, it has plummeted to depths unimaginable, hovering now around 1,600 Naira per dollar as of this month, September 2025, representing a depreciation of over 250% in just over 2 years. This is not a natural fluctuation. It is a catastrophe engineered by policies of deregulation without safeguards, floating the currency in a sea of speculation while corruption and mismanagement drain the central bank's reserves. Inflation has surged beyond 30%, eroding purchasing power and turning everyday essentials like rice and fuel into luxuries for millions. Your administration's hasty unification of exchange rates, applauded by Western economists as market-friendly, has instead exposed Nigeria to predatory forex traders and capital flight, with billions siphoned out as foreign investors hedge against your instability. The black market thrives, widening the gap between official and parallel rates, fostering arbitrage that benefits the elite while the average Nigerian queues for hours at ATMs, only to withdraw worthless notes. Instead of marshaling resources to stabilize this currency crisis, perhaps by cracking down on illicit financial flows, boosting non-oil exports through targeted incentives, or negotiating fairer terms in global trade, you have prioritized globetrotting, jetting off to Europe with alarming frequency. Since taking office, you have embarked on at least 43 foreign trips, spending nearly 181 days abroad, including 15 excursions in 2025 alone. These jaunts to Paris, London, Berlin, and beyond are often shrouded in vagueness. Bilateral meetings, investment summits, or, most recently, a 10-day working vacation in Europe that conveniently overlaps with whispers of personal matters. What urgent business demands such incessant travel when your nation's economy teeters on the brink? Your aides boast that these voyages have attracted over $50 billion in foreign direct investment. But where is the evidence on the ground? FDI inflows remain anemic, concentrated in extractive industries that repatriate profits rather than create jobs, while domestic manufacturers shutter factories due to forex shortages. These trips consume billions in taxpayer funds, private jets, entourages, per diems, all while schools lack textbooks and roads crumble. You traverse the Atlantic for photo ops with European leaders, yet neglect the Sahel's security partnerships or ECOWAS summits that could foster regional stability and trade. This nomadic presidency betrays a leader detached from his people's plight, more comfortable in the opulent halls of Brussels than the bustling markets of Lagos, where vendors count depreciated nairas in despair. And let us interrogate this pattern further, for it reveals a deeper hypocrisy in your handling of Nigeria's healthcare sector. You have repeatedly claimed to have equipped and revitalized the system, boasting of 1,000 primary healthcare centers upgraded, free cesarean sections for 4,000 women, plans for 10 new oncology and diagnostic facilities, and the retraining of 120,000 health workers. Your administration touts policies like mandatory health insurance for all MDAs and a national strategy to stem workforce migration, painting a picture of a 21st century health infrastructure rising from the ashes of neglect. Vice President Shettima echoes this, declaring your renewed hope agenda is repositioning the sector through enhanced financing and human resource reforms. If these assertions hold true, if Nigeria's hospitals are now bastions of excellence, stocked with cutting-edge equipment and staffed by world-class professionals, then why, Mr. President, do you not avail yourself of them? Why must you flee to European clinics for routine checkups or rumored treatments, as reports persist of medical sojourns in France and the UK, even amid denials from your palace? In January 2025 alone, Nigerians called upon you to halt this medical tourism, urging you to utilize the N21 billion State House Clinic instead of allocating funds for foreign care. Yet, you persist, joining the ranks of elites who spend an estimated $20,000 annually on overseas treatments, draining national forex reserves while local facilities languish with outdated scanners, drug shortages, and striking doctors. This reliance on European healthcare is not mere preference. It is a damning indictment of your own failures and a clear sign of puppetry to the West. We have seen it time and again. Your trips coincide with health rumors, bedridden spells, urgent flights arranged by medical teams, only for the presidency to dismiss them as fabrications, all while you recover in foreign luxury. This pattern exposes the hollowness of your investments. The revitalized centers serve as propaganda props, photo opportunities for ribbon cuttings, but falter in reality with underpaid staff emigrating en masse, over 5,000 doctors lost annually, and patients dying from preventable ailments due to power outages or lack of oxygen. By seeking treatment abroad, you signal to Nigerians that their leader deems local care inadequate, eroding public trust and perpetuating a two-tier system. World-class for the powerful via Europe, substandard for the masses at home. This is the essence of being a European puppet. Outsourcing your well-being to former colonial powers, who in turn use aid and loans to influence health policies. Pushing privatization that favors their pharmaceutical giants or partnerships that extract data and talent. Your oncology initiatives, laudable on paper, rely on Western funding with strings attached, turning Nigeria into a testing ground for imported drugs while local herbal knowledge and research are sidelined. Delving even deeper, this medical exodus ties directly to the Naira's woes and your travel addiction. Each foreign treatment siphons millions in dollars, exacerbating currency pressure as you convert Naira at inflated rates to fund European hospitals. Meanwhile, the health sector's budget, despite your claims, remains under 5% of GDP, far below the Abuja Declaration's 15% target, with funds diverted to debt servicing or vanity projects. Why not redirect those travel budgets to equip teaching hospitals in Abuja or Lagos with the MRI machines and specialists you seek abroad? Your puppetry is evident in how European nations benefit. They gain from medical tourism revenues, pharmaceutical exports, and the brain drain of Nigerian professionals who staff their NHS or French clinics. We have seen this complicity in your silence on repatriating stolen funds held in Swiss banks, funds that could build a dozen world-class hospitals, or in endorsing WHO frameworks that prioritize global vaccine deals over local production capacity. This is not leadership. It is subservience, allowing Europeans to profit from Nigeria's ailments while you jet set for cures unavailable to your citizens. Your actions, Mr. President, paint a portrait of a leader ensnared by Western allure, prioritizing continental schmoozing over continental solutions. How can you claim to champion Africa's freedom when you parade as a champion of progress yet embody the very chains that hold us back? The time for such illusions is over, and the Nigerian people must awaken to this reality. My brothers and sisters of Nigeria, I speak now directly to you, the true sovereigns of your land, for it is in your hands that the fate of your nation rests. You cannot afford to let a selfish leader like President Tinubu linger in power, for such figures do far more harm than good. They corrode the fabric of society, erode trust in institutions, and mortgage your future for personal aggrandizement. History is replete with examples. From Mobutu in Zaire to Mugabe in Zimbabwe, leaders who prioritized self over service turned prosperous nations into wastelands of inequality and despair. Tinubu's tenure mirrors this archetype. A presidency defined by ego-driven decisions, cronyism that enriches a select few, and policies that exacerbate suffering while he indulges in luxury. Selfish leaders breed corruption as a system, not an aberration. They appoint loyalists over experts, stifle dissent to protect their grip, and view the state as a personal fiefdom rather than a public trust. In Nigeria's case, this selfishness manifests in the unchecked looting of public funds, billions diverted from education and infrastructure into offshore accounts, leaving your youth unemployed, your farmers impoverished, and your cities in darkness. They harm the economy by fostering monopolies, like in the oil sector where cabals control distribution, driving up prices and shortages. Socially, they deepen divisions, pitting ethnic groups against one another to distract from failures, as seen in the mishandling of herder-farmer conflicts or the suppression of regional agitations. Morally, they debase the national spirit, teaching generations that power is for plunder, not progress, leading to a brain drain where your brightest minds flee to build other nations while yours stagnates. Delving deeper, selfish leaders like him inflict irreparable damage on democratic institutions, turning elections into farces rigged by money and intimidation, and judiciaries into tools of vendetta. Under Tinubu, we've witnessed the erosion of electoral integrity, allegations of vote buying in off-cycle polls, the harassment of opposition figures, and a media landscape muzzled by draconian laws. This harm extends to Africa's broader struggle. A weakened Nigeria means a fragmented ECOWAS, unable to counter foreign incursions or foster continental trade. Selfish rule perpetuates poverty cycles, where debt mounts not for development but to fund extravagance. Private jets for trips, palatial renovations amid hunger strikes. They do more harm by normalizing inequality. The Gini coefficient in Nigeria hovers at 35.1, but under such leadership, it widens as the top 10% amass wealth from government contracts while the bottom 50% scrapes by on less than $2 a day. Environmentally, selfishness greenlights exploitation, deforestation for export logs, unchecked mining that poisons rivers, all for kickbacks, accelerating climate disasters that displace millions. Psychologically, it harms the populace, breeding cynicism and apathy. Why vote or innovate when the system rewards sycophancy? In the long term, these leaders leave legacies of instability. Coups, insurgencies, and migrations that destabilize neighbors. As Nigeria's woes spill into the Sahel, they can't be in power for long because their selfishness invites backlash. The NSAR's protests were a harbinger, a collective roar against systemic harm. Yet, if allowed to persist, they entrench dynasties, grooming successors to continue the cycle, turning democracies into autocracies in disguise. Nigerians, the hour demands action. You must either rally for a decisive change through the ballot in the 2027 elections, mobilizing en masse, protecting your votes, and electing leaders committed to transparency and Pan-Africanism, or, if the system proves irredeemably captured, consider the path of principled intervention, as we in Burkina Faso did, to reclaim your sovereignty through a people's uprising that restores dignity and justice. Selfish tyrants thrive on division and fear. Unite against them, for their harm outweighs any fleeting stability they claim to provide. Let 2027 be the dawn of a new Nigeria, free from puppets and propelled by the will of its people. In closing, Mr. President, reflect on these words not as an attack, but as a call to redemption. Africa watches, and history will not absolve those who betray her. To the Nigerian people, rise, reclaim, and rebuild. Thank you.